Hello everybody, this is the first of a series doing tutorials for Premiere CC, Adobe's Premiere CC. I'll be dividing these up into sections so you guys will be able to go through and choose sections or just watch the whole tutorial all the way through if you'd like. Anyway, I'm going to start up Adobe CC here. The tutorial that I've got is going to work pretty much for Windows as well as Mac. I'll try to give you shortcuts for Windows as well as Mac, which are pretty similar. A lot of them are control functions as opposed to command functions and a few other minor differences. But anyway, so let's get started here right away. When you first open up Premiere, you're going to see a few little items here. You'll see the splash screen that comes up. Let's go through every little quick section here. Sync settings to Creative Cloud is kind of the first thing you see right here. What this does is if you do presets or settings within Premiere, you'll be able to go under this option right here and log in. You have to have like a subscription through an email to have Creative Cloud, and you can type that email, and if you click on that, you'll notice it brings up this little window here asking you to log in. If you haven't created an account, then you can if you're on a trial, or you just use your login, your Adobe login and password here, and then you'll log in. And once you log in, you'll see that it syncs with your account. So if you have presets, if you have window arrangements, if you have settings, which we'll show you here in the short future, then you can, if you're using somebody else's computer and you want to, and you have some presets you want to use while you're working on somebody else's version of CC, you can use your settings from a different account. You can click on that, log into your account, and it will restore the settings that you've saved. If you're familiar with Chrome, you can save bookmarks and a whole bunch of different other items that kind of do a custom window for Chrome when you open up Chrome wherever you are, whatever computer you're on when you log in. This is in a very similar sense. Will keep all your settings on a server that will download it to that computer that you're working on, so which is nice. Okay. Down here quickly, you've got open recent items. You can click on open a project and open up a project file, or you can open up a recent item that you've been working on, or if you're starting a new project, you'll go up to create new. So if you're working on a previous project, you're going to open project or find it here in recent. Otherwise, you're going to hit new project, and of course you can always open a project from the browser. Just clicking your browser and going through and finding where you may have a project that you've been working on. You can open up that project. Just go double click on the project file and it will open it up. I'll give you a quick rundown of how projects work in Premiere if you've ever worked with Final Cut Pro in the past as well. It's very similar that you have a project file, and this project file, if you go to a project file like right here, you'll notice that the project file is not very large. This one here is a very small project that I've just started, and it's 80 kilobytes, which is teeny. That does not include the media. It does not add the media. It's not like a PowerPoint project that includes all the media inside your project file. It is separate from all of your media. In fact, here's all my media for a project that I'm working on right here. I've got footage, stills, I've got a voiceover, I've got some other items in here. All these items are referenced by this project file. So if you're working on a server, if you're working on a project where you're sending a project file to somebody else, as long as they have all the same media, you can just email them this little teeny project file, and it will relink to all the media and open up the project. But this basically tells all this media here how to act. So this project file will stay relatively pretty small. I mean, the most that gets, especially in CC, the largest I've seen a project file is probably like 1 to 2 megabytes at the very most, even for bigger projects. So, but yeah, you can double click on this. It'll open up a project file. Right now, what I'm going to do is from this initial splash screen that we had here in the first place, I'm going to just pretend that we're starting a new project here. They also have some learning links here. I've never really clicked on any of those. You can learn about new features there, and you can also tell it not to show this when you start it up by unchecking that. I kind of like it because I can open up recent projects once I've opened up Premiere, but I'm going to start a new project. Once you click new project, it's going to bring up some options here. With these options, right here is going to be what you're going to name your new project. So like this project file I've got down here, that was named up here in this window here. I'm going to be doing a new project here. I'm going to click New Project. I've got some footage that I'm going to be bringing into the project. So I'm going to click on New Project. Now what we've got up here, it'll bring up a new little screen here. We've got up here what you're going to name your project. This is going to be the project name that references all the media that you're going to be editing. So this I'm going to name. I'm going to call this Death of Me, which is a movie project I've been working on. Project. It's just one scene that I've got. I'm going to be editing here, so that's going to be the name of the project. Right here is the location where it's going to save that. Most Adobe products have this sort of splash screen that pops up that asks you what you're going to name your project and where you're going to save it. I'm going to hit Browse and going to save this in a location. On a Mac here, for on a PC, you navigate in a very similar way. Go through your browser. I'm going to click on, I've got an old drive here that I'm connecting to. I've got my drive plugged in. I've got all my media on this drive, and I'm going to go down to the folder that I'm working in. And I've got this Death of Me scene that I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to go inside the Death of Me scene. You can save the project file anywhere you want to. I usually like to save the project file within the folder, and I do an autosave which backs up that project file in another location. I also have my media backed up in another location as well. As the saying goes in the business, if you don't have 3 copies of something, it doesn't exist, which is kind of the way it goes. If you have your project file and all this media in this folder here and you lose your hard drive dies or gets stolen or gets dropped or something, you just lost your entire project. So you'll want to back up your media, back up your project file, and do it frequently. I use a software called ChronoSync, 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 which is it's a nice software to be able to back up. It reads the newer files that you've created, and it updates your older files on another project, on another hard drive, so it doesn't take so long for it to back the whole thing up. It just backs up the new files and changes the new files and backs everything up if you've done changes to a folder. Anyway, I'm going to go to this new destination and choose. So choose that location. You'll notice now that location has been selected and the project name has been named. Some more things in here on the flash screen here. If you've got a newer computer that you're working on or a computer that supports the OpenCL acceleration, what OpenCL does is you don't have to have either one of these check mark. It helps if you're doing a lot of effects, or it does help speed things up. If you do have this option that's not grayed out, if you have a video card that supports OpenCL playback, what it uses, it uses your graphics card as opposed to just using the software and the processor to accelerate the video playback. The GPU acceleration helps to play back the video a lot faster and helps to process effects and play back effects real time without having to render, which we'll get into later as well. We'll get into rendering and a whole bunch of different things later on in other parts of this series here. So if you have this option, choose the GPU acceleration. It's the best way to go. Otherwise, your only option is going to be to keep it on software if this one is grayed out. Don't panic if it's grayed out. Just use software only, and you should be fine depending on if your computer is built post 1976. That's a joke. Okay, display format. We're gonna tell it. You can go in and tell it to ways to display. If you're working in film and you want it to show feet and frames with a 35 millimeter, 16 millimeter, or just your frames. Time code is pretty standard way of reading every single individual frame. Every frame will have its own given code to it. It goes in a logical sequence. You'll see what time code is. We'll describe that later on. But time code is probably the most common one to be used. Film, they will use feet and frames. If they're doing a film transfer, video to film transfer, or film to video transfer, it helps to keep track of all the film. With everything digital that we're working on, we're going to stick with time code though. So usually most of these things you can leave pretty much alone on the default and get in and start editing. But just telling you what these things are so you know Premiere inside and out. Display format on audio samples are milliseconds. If you're just doing video editing and you're not an audio mixer, audio samples is going to be just fine. What Premiere does is it edits instead of to the if you're working 24 frames per second video, the audio works as does not work in frame rate. It works in samples. And samples, it actually equals out to like, about 180, anywhere from 80 to 120 frames per second is really what it kind of equals out to with as many samples as it has. So it's a little different than video, but when you bring in a Premiere and you're just doing basic editing, you're going to be editing video or audio to the same frame rate basically as the video. Unless you go in and do some different changes here, and we're not doing significant sound mixing. We're working from in Premiere from the standpoint of an editor. This is an editing software. It's what they call a cutter. It's basically meant for editing and cutting, and the sound mix can be done later by somebody who knows how to do sound. So we're going to kind of take it from that point of view a little bit more, but we will show you audio features as well as we move along, because you can do a lot of audio mixing in Premiere. But that's what this is referring to here, and you can just leave that on audio samples right now for the display format. Under capture, this is ancient, to be honest. Unless you're working with a DV camera or an HDV camera, then you don't even have to worry about this, and you can change it anyway if you're going to be capturing from HDV or DV. But right now, this is only if you're going to be capturing from a camera with FireWire. Once again, this is antiquated. It's kind of old. I mean, it's not, you don't have to worry about this with the newer cameras where you've got a solid state card and you just transfer all the footage off into a folder, which we've done here. Let me show you that really quick. I'm going to bring up my folder here and show you that. I'm going to go under Death of Me scene. This was shot on a red camera here, and the red footage has been imported into this video folder in here, and somebody's changed the red folder name because I think they just brought the clips in. This will work just fine. But all these, every single folder here, if you've worked with red, counts as a clip. But needless to say, the footage has been transferred from the red camera from a solid state drive here into the hard drive. When you're using tape, you're going to have to use the camera, or you'll have to use the software to capture it live from the tape in real time. You play the tape and it records into the system. We could show that as well. Actually, we're probably going to stick with the more solid state because there's not many people using DV or HDV cameras anymore. They're pretty much all solid state now. This will probably go away or be in some hidden place at some point, just because this is getting really antiquated here. That's the word of the day, antiquated. Okay, scratch discs. Next tab here. So that's the general settings right there. Let's go through the scratch disk settings here. Like I said, most of this stuff, once you've changed the name and the location, you can almost ignore a lot of this stuff. What we've got here under scratch discs, once again, something ancient left over in Premiere. I guess for people using HDV or DV tape cameras, it's asking, where do you want to save captured video once you capture that? And it now default in CC, it goes to the same location that you have your project saved in. So it's going to the same folder for captured video and audio from tape cameras. So that's really not all that important. Video previews. This is when it re-renders. This is when it rebuilds, or they call it in Premiere previews files. It basically rebuilds new files, adding the effects to the files to optimize speed. It's going to be putting them into these folders, in the video previews folders, and the audio. And same with audio. If you're doing effects on audio as well as video, it'll rebuild those files and place those effects in these folders. If you're working on a newer computer, you won't have to do this as much, because the GPU, the graphics processor, is going to basically do a lot of the real-time processing with those effects, where you don't need to keep stopping and rendering every time you add an effect. Okay, this is very important though, right here, the autosave vault. Autosave vault, that comes from Final Cut Pro days. But the autosave option here, it's going to be saving the project files into the same location by default as your project file. That in essence is a bad idea. And the reason why that is a bad idea is because if your hard drive crashes and you have your project file and your autosave files on the same hard drive, then all your autosaves are dead, and your regular project file is dead. And you're not getting those back if your hard drive's dead. So it is good, in my opinion, to not be lazy and set a different location. You might want to do it in your documents or somewhere else on the computer that you're working on. I'm just going to do it on the desktop and and just call it, actually I'm just going to do it on my desktop. That'll be fine. Not even going to create a new folder. I usually do it in my document folder, and I have an autosave folder in there that saves it for every individual project. I'm going to hit choose, and I've selected the desktop location. I'm going to hit OK, and this is all set up. So that's basically it for this setup window right here. You kind of know the things that you can ignore and not ignore. Make your name of the project, find the location, general. If you can, set this to GPU. This stuff you can pretty much ignore and leave alone. The scratch disks, you can leave pretty much all this stuff alone, but the project autosave I usually save to my a separate hard drive besides the one that I'm working off of in case it crashes. And I keep my media backed up on another hard drive as well. Hit OK. Now that we are in Premiere, I'm going to go through this is still kind of the setup section of Premiere here, getting everything set up, ready to go. Now the settings that you do inside of Premiere here, the preferences that you work out and the preferences that you create in Premiere, these are going, if you decide to sync to the Adobe server, this will it will remember all these settings. If you arrange windows a certain way, if you change some general preferences with timeline and with the way Premiere looks and operates, those settings, it will save it to the Adobe server. So you don't need to every time you get on a new computer, you don't need to keep setting Premiere up in different ways. And once you've set up Premiere in a very specific way, the way you sync is you're going to go up to Premiere Pro. You'll see this as long as you've logged in at the beginning of the screen. You'll see your name up here, and you will see over here see this option to sync settings now. If you do some changes and you hit sync settings now, it will sync those saved settings to the server. But we're going to show you some of those items right now. If you go under Premiere Pro, up here at the top, on a PC, this will be under Edit, and you'll find Preferences under Edit on a PC. But under Premiere, on a Mac, you're going to find this under Premiere Pro, Preferences, and you're going to see a whole bunch of different options here. I'm just going to click on Preferences right now. I'm going to go into Preferences and hit General. It'll bring up this window, and it will have all these options here that you just saw in that little drop-down menu. When I went to Preferences, you saw all these options up there. It brings it up in this Preference pane here, and you can go through and change some of the preferences for Premiere. I'm just going to go through some of these quick, some of the more important ones. A lot of these you can ignore. It depends on really what your function is. If you're working with a studio, if you're working in a commercial production place, if you're working in some place that has a kind of a centralized server, there's some options in here you'd have to go change. I'm going to go through some of these basics here and show you some of these features. A lot of these you can just read through and see what they do. First of all, under General, I'm going to skip through a lot of these because a lot of these you can just leave alone. It has some important things in here though, like video transition default duration. Your video transitions, like a dissolve, will automatically be 30 frames by default, which is 1 second if you're working in 30 frames per second. You have an audio transition of 1 second, which directly relates to the frame rate of the video, which if it's 30 frames per second will be 30 frames as well, essentially in audio. It'll be equal to about the same timing there. Now when you import still images, things like JPEGs, PNGs, bitmaps, this right here, oops, change that, is going to be the length of those. They'll bring them in as if they are video clips, and it will bring them in at 150 frames. Divide that by 30, and what do we get there? 150 divided by 30 frames per second, that's basically 5 seconds. So 150 frames, it's about that's 5 seconds if you're working at 30 frames per second. It's a little bit longer if you're working at 24 frames per second. But that it'll bring in the images as if they're 5-second video clips. You can change those if you want to do a single frame. If you're doing animation, if you're doing a few other things, you can change them. You can make them last 10 seconds, 15 seconds, however long you want to. There are some other options in here. You can kind of go around and mess with some of these things. I'm not going to go through every single one. It'll take forever to go through all these options here. But a lot of these options are just going to be shortcuts that we're doing when we're just in the project itself, and we're going to get into shortcuts as well. Appearance. Now, I kind of joke with people that sometimes if you're a Final Cut 7 enthusiast and you really like Final Cut 7 and you don't like Premiere, or you don't want to learn Premiere because you like Final Cut Pro, well, you can pretty much do two things to make it pretty much exactly like Final Cut Pro. You grab your brightness and you drag it to lighter. There we go. Now we got the look. I'm going to hit OK. And another option you have, which we'll come back to here, is this keyboard shortcuts under Premiere Pro. Click on that, and you can pull this down and say, keyboard layout, I want to use Final Cut 7 shortcuts. And you hit OK, and we pretty much have Final Cut Pro now. So now the look, I mean, of course, it's not exactly like it, but yeah, if you want it to look like Final Cut Pro, there you go. You can go to your email here and say sync settings now. These settings that I've made here, you can put your password in, and it will sync those settings. So when you sit down, you can download those settings to your new computer. I'm going to upload those settings. Remember my preference if you want, and upload those settings automatically when I sync. It'll upload these settings to the Adobe server, and now when I sit down on another computer, it'll download these settings, and you'll have the same look, you'll have the same keyboard shortcuts, whatever else you've changed. But I don't like those keyboard shortcuts. I like the Premiere ones I've gotten used to, so I'm just going to do Premiere Pro default, hit OK. Okay, under audio, they've got some options here. Some of the most important ones, I think, is playing audio while scrubbing. You can hear the audio as you scrub through it, which is important. A lot of these things you can set up as you're doing timeline setup and management, and we'll get into that. So I kind of skip over. I'm going to skip over some of these items here. If you're working in 5.1 mixdown, if you have 5.1 surround sound hooked up to your system, that's important. Hardware, this gets a little bit more complex. If you're working with different audio output units, if you've got something like a Sapphire or a Motu or some other sort of audio device, a Pro Tools device or something like that, you can send your audio through that device as well. You can pull this down and tell it to choose. At my work, I'm oftentimes working on a Blackmagic accelerated card, a 4K Blackmagic card that I can choose the audio that goes through the SDI cable to the Blackmagic audio out device, which is kind of a nice way to go as well. So just if you have audio hardware, you can choose that audio hardware here, and it will send the audio through that device. Autosave. Okay, a couple other things here that I'm going to use to set up. Automatically save projects here. This will keep updating your autosave files. It'll keep saving your autosave. It'll keep saving a project every 15 minutes. So right now this is set to, it will save a project file every 15 minutes. I set this for about 2 minutes because 15 minutes to me, if it saves something that it crashes and I lost 14 minutes of work, that's a lot of work for me. Actually, I wouldn't even mind a minute. If the project files get bigger, sometimes it takes a little bit longer to save and it can be a little obnoxious. But for most projects, I like it saving at least every 2 minutes. So for my general preferences, I'm going to set that to every 2 minutes. Maximum project versions, I'm going to say 99. Because if you want to go back in time and find a project file, a certain version that you wanted to go back to and revert to, you can. It's got all these project files saved. It'll put it in its own folder and save up to 99 times. They're small files, so it's not going to take up a lot of space. And you'll have more options. So every 2 minutes it's going to save, autosave, and it's going to save up to 99. And then it will start overwriting the older ones after it gets up to that number. Capture. This all deals with ancient cameras here. Things like if it starts dropping frames because your hard drive's not enough or it doesn't have enough speed, it'll stop the capture. Things like that. Control surface, if you have a control surface that you're working with to do editing. My control surface is a keyboard and mouse. Very used to it. And most editors just use a keyboard and mouse to edit with. Device control, once again, ancient camera stuff to control your camera from the computer. Label colors here, if you're going to be labeling media, we will get into this in label defaults, changing colors for selecting and highlighting certain types of media. We'll get into that. Media. Okay, this is kind of something important to be discussed here. A couple things that Adobe does is creating media cache files and creating a database based on those cache files here. Basically, this is information such as for video and audio files. When you import them, it's going to be creating one waveform files for the audio to play back the audio, so you can actually see your audio as well as hear it. And it's going to be creating this place. It's going to be creating that information. So when you open up Premiere, it doesn't have to rebuild it. It has it all saved in a certain location. Sometimes you'll notice if you switch computers that it rebuilds those files. It builds the video preview files and the audio waveform files. And if you want to keep those without having to rebuild every time you open up Premiere on a different computer, you're going to want to save those files, those media cache files, next to the originals when possible, and you're going to browse to a location. Not everybody has to do this, and if it's a small project, it won't take too long for it to rebuild. But I'm going to go to my same folder that I'm working out of and choose. You just have to be careful to save that location every time you do a new project, because right now it's going to be saving those. I wish it would automatically go to your project file, but it automatically goes to this location on a Mac. I can't remember what it goes to on a PC, but I changed these to the same location that I'm working out of. And if it asks you, you're going to move your database to its new location as well. So it doesn't have to rebuild it. It moves that information. Now, this stuff dealing with time code and media time base, you don't even have to worry about, because you're going to set up timelines based on the clip settings here most of the time. Other things, if you're sending clips out, if you're sending footage out to be color corrected in something like DaVinci Resolve or other things, there's some important stuff to know here. We're not going to get into that right now, but you can leave these things pretty much the same, because a lot of the stuff can be set up later on. But if you wish, you can set these to the same location that you're working out of on that project. Memory, if you're working with a little bit of memory on your if you're not working with a very fast machine, you can start allocating memory given keeping a certain amount of RAM reserved just for Premiere, so it doesn't tie up all the resources on your computer. You have these little optimize if you want to optimize rendering for memory or performance. Performance is the default. It's probably the best way to go, especially if you're on a faster machine or on a newer machine that's at least less than a couple of years old. Playback. Okay, this is good to know. A lot of people don't know about this, but when you are editing on two screens, I've got a dual screen setup, but you're just looking at a single screen that I'm recording here. If you check mark, what it will do is it'll read your monitors, and it's reading I've got one monitor and two monitors, monitor 1 and 2, my left monitor and my right monitor. If you check mark one of these, it will play your video as you're playing in Premiere. It will play it full screen, full screen to a television. It'll play it on your secondary monitor if you have this check marked. This is good to know here, because I like to see the footage while I'm editing it. I like it on a bigger screen as opposed to just this little window up here. So as I'm playing, I will oftentimes have my video going full screen on my second device. If you're doing it through a FireWire device, that's what Adobe DV is. Don't worry about that. Once again, ancient, antiquated, and this is the good way to go right here. If you have hardware like a Blackmagic device, you will see that pop up in here if your drivers have been successfully installed. You can send it, so if you've got a Blackmagic and you're trying to get it go through SDI to a professional monitor, you just usually have to check your Blackmagic device here and hit OK, and it will play it out through your Blackmagic device or other video output device. Sync settings, these are the settings for syncing your Premiere settings. Titler, don't worry about this right now. All your titling is going to be done in a different part of the software, trim, and don't worry about this stuff either. This is all going to be done with tools inside the software. Some of these are redundant, some of these are very particular. Some editors like to go in and tweak some of these. Most people are going to leave a lot of these options. I kind of covered the most important options that most people will be using in Premiere. I'm going to hit OK, and almost done here. We got one more option here on this first setup section that we're going to cover, and that is going to be under File and Project Settings. If you go to Project Settings and go to Scratch Disks, or general, bring up these, you're going to see the same settings that it brought on your first setup. Your scratch discs and your general, you will see the exact same settings if you skip through any of those and you need to go back and change them, once again, those are not under your preferences. Those are under File, Project Settings, and you hit either scratch discs or general, and it will bring up those options right there. And that is about it for the basic setup for Premiere. In the next segment, we're going to show you guys how to start importing footage.